Is this even real? You need a real card for this hotel. Samantha Keller's voice sliced through the luxurious hush of the Avalon Grand Hotel. Her words weren't just loud. They were designed to sting. She dangled Eli Ross's Amex Centurion card between two fingers as if it were tainted. Welcome to Unveiled Wealth, the channel where we share powerful stories of dignity, perseverance, and justice. If you're ready to be inspired by untold journeys of overcoming adversity, you're in the right place. Now, let's begin the story. Eli stood calmly, his deep brown eyes meeting hers without flinching. That card is valid. You're welcome to run it, he said, his voice a rich baritone that carried an unshakable dignity. Samantha tilted her head, lips curling into a cruel smirk. Sir, this is a five-star property. We don't take prepaid cards from just anyone who wanders in. Her gaze swept him from polished leather shoes to tailored charcoal suit, but all she seemed to see was the color of his skin. Gasps rippled from nearby guests. A man in an expensive coat whispered behind his hand. A woman clutched her handbag tighter as she stared openly. I suggest you try the Holiday Inn down the block, Samantha added, tapping the card on the counter as though shooing away a beggar. I could call you a cab if you'd like. Eli's jaw tightened. His hands remained at his sides, but his voice cooled even further. No need want unmembran. Run. The card. The words struck like quiet thunder. The sneers and whispers died instantly. Samantha hesitated, cheeks coloring faintly, but she held her ground with forced authority. For Eli, the scene was painfully familiar. The weight of decades of casual insults and blatant prejudice pressed invisibly against his back. But still he stood tall, his pride untouched. The silence deepened. Around them, the ornate lobby faded into irrelevance. There was only the woman who refused to see and the man who refused to be diminished. Samantha stared down her nose at Eli Ross as if he were a child who had wandered where he didn't belong. I'm going to get my manager, she announced curtly, sliding his card back toward him without even trying it. I told you to run the card, Eli replied, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Ignoring him, Samantha pivoted on her heels. Within moments, Philip Danvers, the hotel manager, appeared. Mid-40s, sleek suit, perfectly styled hair, and the polished grin of someone used to issuing dismissals with fake politeness. Is there a problem here, Philip asked, not even looking at Eli. Samantha answered first. This gentleman is attempting to check in with a prepaid card. He seems confused about our standards. Philip finally turned to Eli, eyes cold despite the smile. Sir, perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a property more suited to your expectations. We do have partnerships with some more affordable options. Eli met his stare evenly. My expectation is that you treat guests with respect. Philip's smirk didn't falter. Of course, but our clientele expect a certain standard. Nearby, a bellhop froze mid-step. A couple waiting for the elevator whispered and glanced over. The humiliation was now a spectacle. Eli calmly slid the black card forward again. Run it. Philip didn't even touch the card. Perhaps it's best if you take your business elsewhere, sir. The words hung heavy. Eli straightened his shoulders but didn't move. You're making a mistake. Security is available if necessary, Philip added smoothly. The raw disrespect crackled like static between them. Eli inhaled slowly, controlled. You'll regret this. Without another word, he picked up his card and ID, turned sharply, and walked away from the counter with unshakable grace. The lobby whispered again, judgmental eyes tracking his exit. Eli's measured steps defied every insult hurled at him without a single word of apology ever offered. Eli Ross stepped away from the front desk, his jaw set, expression unreadable. He pulled out his phone and calmly dialed a number. The murmurs and sneers of the lobby swirled behind him. The call connected almost instantly. James, watch sir. Cancel the Row WMB deal. Effective immediately. A stunned pause followed on the line. Sir, that's a 69 billion merger. Eli's voice never wavered. I said no discussion. Pull it. Click. The call ended. Eli slipped the phone back into his pocket and turned slowly. Samantha and Philip stood by the desk, watching him with smug satisfaction, assuming he was arranging a cab. Philip leaned toward Samantha. Problem solved. Narrator service sub. He'll be gone in minutes. Samantha chuckled softly. Unbelievable. Some people don't know their place. Across the lobby, Chloe, a young intern at the front desk, had witnessed everything. She stared at her phone, stunned as breaking news alerts began lighting up her screen. Her eyes widened. $69 billion deal canceled. Rowe pulls out of WMB partnership. Eli Ross identified as controlling investor? Her gaze snapped back to the calm man walking steadily toward the doors. Samantha frowned as Chloe whispered, "Oh my God." What Samantha demanded sharply. Chloe looked up slowly. "You just humiliated the man who controls more wealth than this entire building is worth." Samantha paled. "That's impossible." Philip's fake composure faltered as he frantically pulled out his phone. Eli reached the entrance, paused, and glanced back over his shoulder once. His calm stare landed squarely on Philip and Samantha. Without a word, he pushed open the heavy glass doors and disappeared into the biting Chicago night. The lobby froze. The humiliation they had tried to inflict had just boomeranged violently back toward them. Whispers filled the air again. But this time, they weren't mocking Eli Ross, they were in awe. Eli Ross hadn't always commanded empires. Once, he was just a boy in Birmingham, Alabama, 1957. The oppressive summer heat thickened the air, and racial tensions weighed heavier than humidity. At 15, Eli knelt on blistering sidewalks outside Harlan's diner, shining shoes for businessmen who never acknowledged his existence. His mother, Elma Ross, worked as a housekeeper for two families, returning home exhausted but determined. "They can work your hands," she told young Eli over flickering candlelight as they studied secondhand books, "but never let them take your mind." Eli's life changed the day he wandered into a tiny, cluttered bookstore wedged between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The faded sign read Chen's Books. Inside, an older Asian man looked up from his newspaper. "Can I help you?" "Just looking, sir." Eli braced for the usual dismissal. "But Mr. Chen simply nodded. "Take your time." Eli spent hours absorbing titles he'd never dreamed of accessing. His hand lingered over a worn finance textbook before setting it back with a sigh. "Mr. Chen's voice stopped him. "You like that one? I want to learn how money works, but I can't afford it." "Mr. Chen studied him quietly. Then he pushed the book toward Eli. "Take it. Return when you've read it and tell me what you learn." That book became Eli's foundation. Week after week, he returned. Mr. Chen treated him as an equal, a mind worth nurturing, never as a poor black kid from the wrong side of town. Eli learned the language of markets, investment, risk, and leverage under the soft yellow glow of the shop's dusty lamps. By 17, Eli was repairing and reselling radios from junk shops. The profits funded his first small stake in a failing hardware store. Within a year, he had turned it around. He never forgot Chen's books. Decades later, the shop was gone, but the lessons remained. Eli Ross's path was carved through rejection and closed doors. The banks in Birmingham refused him loans, sneering at the very idea of a young black entrepreneur. Undeterred, Eli built his capital by buying and fixing broken radios, reselling them for a profit. The local junkyard owner grew to respect the quiet teenager who never complained, never begged, only bartered. At 21, Eli owned 3 small businesses. He reinvested aggressively, first into a dilapidated hardware store, then into 2 rental properties. Each venture meant learning new skills: contracts, accounting, tenant disputes, repairs. The racism never faded. Landlords tried to swindle him. Suppliers doubled prices behind his back. Yet Eli's discipline and sharp instincts saved him every time. By 30, Eli pivoted toward commercial real estate. He saw potential where others saw ruin. Abandoned warehouses, condemned buildings, they became profitable assets in Eli's vision. At 32, he met Gloria Jackson. She had walked into his modest office, sharp-witted and fearless, seeking work as an assistant. Eli offered her a job on the spot. Gloria soon became his closest advisor. Together, they navigated hostile negotiations and predatory lenders. When major banks rejected Eli's proposals, Gloria's fierce advocacy often turned no into reluctant yes. Every milestone came at a cost: sleepless nights, legal battles, and constant reminders that the system wasn't built for men like Eli Ross. Yet he persevered, using rejection as fuel. The ultimate irony came when those same banks who had denied him now begged for his deposits. Eli never sought revenge. He sought independence. His philosophy was simple: own, don't owe. By the time Eli Ross reached his early 70s, he had become a shadow billionaire. His real estate empire spanned coast to coast, tech investments, energy holdings, transportation hubs, media ventures, and philanthropic endowments all quietly controlled behind layers of trusts and private partnerships. His name rarely appeared in headlines. Eli had designed it that way. He avoided luxury for luxury's sake. His Chicago penthouse, while elegant, reflected substance over flash. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, African sculptures, vintage vinyl records, and an antique record player spinning John Coltrane filled his home. The walls were lined with framed contracts from his earliest deals, reminders of how far he had come. Gloria Jackson remained his most trusted confidant, now COO of his holding company. Their friendship, built over decades of shared struggle, was unshakable. Gloria had once described him as the most underestimated powerhouse in American finance. At 73, Eli maintained an exhausting work schedule. He met with young minority entrepreneurs, mentored small business owners, and sat on the boards of 2 global nonprofits. Each meeting, each handshake, was another quiet step toward reshaping access to wealth. But even at the peak of his success, Eli remained wary. He knew institutions still viewed him as the outsider. Doors opened because of his wealth, not because respect had ever been freely given. The planned $3, $69 billion merger with Warren and Blake Investments was to be his final move before retirement, a way to ensure minority entrepreneurs would have generational access to capital. It was to be the capstone of a lifetime, spent building in the shadows. He didn't want fame. He wanted legacy. When Gloria had expressed caution over partnering with W&B, Eli had reassured her, "If they cross the line, I'll pull out in a heartbeat." As the deal neared completion, Eli spent long nights reflecting in his study. Staring out over the glittering Chicago skyline, he thought of Birmingham, the heat, the dust, and the bookstore that had lit his path. That night, as Eli had walked into the Avalon Grand Hotel with his black card in hand, he wasn't just a guest. He was still the boy from Birmingham, still prepared to walk away from anything or anyone who disrespected his worth. The world just didn't know yet what that would cost them. Gareth Blake's voice sliced through the conference room like a whip. "We lost $3, $69 billion because some old man walked out of a hotel." Tanner Wilson remained unfazed. "We underestimated Eli Ross. He holds the cards." Gareth sneered. "I don't care how many cards he holds. He embarrassed me. He embarrassed the firm," Tanner corrected smoothly. "But we can turn this." Gareth leaned forward, his tone venomous. "How?" "David Jackson," Tanner replied, "founder of Tech Oil Innovations. Gloria's son." Gareth's eyes lit up. "Perfect. Leverage the son to strike the mentor. They've been rejected by every VC firm. They're hungry. We offer $50 million, push for control, extract the IP, and discard him after integration. And Eli watches his protege's dreams crushed under our heel." Gareth's grin was cold. "Delicious." Tanner gave a nod. "David has been invited to our Aspen Founders Retreat. I'll make sure he signs." Gareth's fingers drummed the table. "Make sure there's no trace back to us when we get the company." "Already handled," Tanner said calmly. "The contracts will appear generous on the surface, but the hooks will be deep." Gareth smirked. "Do whatever you have to do, Tanner. I want David begging for our money." Tanner stood. "He will." The door closed behind Tanner, leaving Gareth alone. He paced back to the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline. His reflection stared back coldly. "Ross thinks he's untouchable," Gareth muttered. "He forgets how many empires I've taken apart." He grabbed his phone and dialed an internal line. "Schedule a full media blitz. Downplay the canceled deal. Push our market dominance narrative." The voice on the other end replied, "Understood, sir. Also, prepare background on Tech Oil and David Jackson. I want every weakness, every leverage point." "Yes, sir." Gareth ended the call and poured himself a drink. His mind raced with strategy. "This isn't over, Ross," he whispered darkly. "It's only just begun." David Jackson sat silently in his small Chicago office, staring at the email on his screen. An invitation to an exclusive founders retreat in Aspen. The sender, Tanner Wilson, Warren and Blake. His co-founder, Marcus, hovered nearby. "You gonna go?" David hesitated. I don't know. They've never touched startups like ours before." Marcus folded his arms. "Warren and Blake never do charity." "David." The door burst open. Ava Johnson, sharp-eyed and poised, stepped in unannounced. "You can't go," she snapped. David frowned. "Ava, how did you even know?" "I still have sources. Listen to me." Ava dropped a thick folder onto his desk. Warren and Blake doesn't invest. They consume. They gut founders, take the tech, dump the people. David flipped through company names, red ink slashing across once promising ventures. They're targeting you because of Eli, because of your mother. They know you've refused family money. They think you'll bite. David stood abruptly. I've built Tesh Oil without them, without my mom, without Eli. Ava's voice softened slightly. Exactly. That's what makes you vulnerable. Marcus paced. David, they destroyed half these companies in under 2 years. You walk into that retreat, you walk into the lion's den. David stared hard at Ava. Why warn me? Because I've watched too many talented founders get chewed up. And because I owe Eli. He gave me my shot. David closed the folder. I have to hear them out. I need capital to scale. Ava's voice hardened. If you walk through that door, know what you're up against. Tanner Wilson is ruthless. Gareth Blake plays for blood. Marcus added, they'll wine you, dine you, flatter you. The moment you sign, you're finished. David sighed deeply. I'll go. I know. I'll listen. I won't sign anything. Ava pointed a finger. Promise me. You leave with your company intact. David nodded firmly. I promise. Ava gathered her papers. I'll be watching. If they move on you, I'll move faster. Marcus glanced at David. You sure about this? David stared at the screen again. Founders retreat. Aspen glared back at him. His voice dropped to a whisper. Let's see what game they're really playing. The private jet touched down at the Aspen airfield. David stepped out into the crisp mountain air. Waiting at the gate, Tanner Wilson offered a thin smile. Welcome, David. We're glad you could join us. David returned a nod. Let's see what you have to offer. The retreat unfolded like a performance. Lavish dinners, investor panels, ski outings. Tanner never left David's side. You've built something extraordinary, Tanner said over cocktails. Warren and Blake can take you global. I'm here to listen, not to sell. David's reply was firm. Later that evening at the lodge, Gareth Blake cornered David by the fireplace. You've got vision, Gareth said smoothly. We can make you a titan. David smiled thinly. I'm not sure your vision matches mine. Gareth's eyes hardened slightly. Think carefully. Opportunities like this don't come twice. The next night, David returned to his suite to find a small envelope under his door. Inside a USB drive and a note. Don't sign anything. Watch this. He hesitated, then plugged it into his laptop. The screen came alive with a hidden recording. Tanner's voice. Once the deal closes, shift the IP under our shell company. Founders out within a year. Gareth, by the time Jackson realizes, we'll own everything. Let him sue. We'll drag it out for years. David clenched his fists. Names of minority-founded companies appeared on screen acquired, gutted, erased. A knock startled him. Ava's urgent whisper came through the door. David, it's me. He opened it. Ava stepped in, breathless. They know I'm here. They're watching us both. David's stare was cold steel. I know what they plan. Ava touched his arm. You have to leave. Walk away. I can't. David shook his head. This isn't just about Tesh Oil anymore. Ava lowered her voice. They've destroyed dozens of founders. You'll be next. David unplugged the USB drive slowly. Then I'm not just fighting for Tech Oil. I'm fighting for everyone they've crushed. Ava's eyes widened. You're going to expose them. David's voice was firm. Yes, and Mosh said theory. The game changes now. He stared out at the snow-covered pines, determination hardening his features. We fight back. The morning light filtered through the massive windows of the Aspen Lodge. David stood in the lobby, his jaw tight, as Tanner approached with a wide, polished smile. Good morning, David. I trust you've had time to review our offer. David slipped the USB into his coat pocket, keeping his expression unreadable. We need to talk. Tanner motioned to a private meeting room. Of course. Inside, Gareth Blake waited, leaning back casually. David, ready to change your life. David sat across from them, folding his hands calmly. I watched the file. Gareth froze. Tanner's confident facade cracked. What file? David leaned in. The one where you laid out your plan to gut my company and discard me. Gareth's eyes narrowed dangerously. You misunderstand. That's out of context. Save it. David's voice was sharp steel. I know what you've done to others. I won't be next. Tanner tried a soothing tone. Let's not get emotional. We're prepared to offer favorable terms. Equity, bonuses, board control. Personal wealth you've never imagined. David shook his head. I built tech oil for community empowerment, not for you to strip it bare. Gareth's expression hardened. You walk away now. You lose everything. We'll tie you up in court for years. You'll be blacklisted in every major market. David's voice cut through the room. Do your worst. I have the truth. Tanner stepped forward, voice low and threatening. If you leak that recording, you'll regret it. We have ways of dealing with problems. Careers disappear. David stood, unflinching. I'm not afraid of bullies in expensive suits. Gareth sneered. Do you really think a little blog and whispers will topple us? We've survived worse. A sharp voice interrupted. Ava entered swiftly, a phone in hand, recording. He won't have to. We have proof and witnesses. Gareth shot to his feet. You're bluffing. Ava smirked coldly. Try me. We've secured multiple backups. You can't silence this. Tanner glared. You're making a huge mistake. David turned to Gareth and Tanner one last time. You came after me, thinking I stood alone. I don't. Gareth sneered again. You think the media will save you? We own the narrative. David's reply was calm and unwavering. Not this time. The truth will speak louder than your spin. With that, David and Ava walked out, leaving Gareth and Tanner stunned. David took a breath of the cold mountain air, his resolve solidifying. The fight starts now, but this time, on my terms. Back at Warren and Blake headquarters in New York, Gareth Blake slammed his fist onto the polished mahogany desk. Tanner Wilson stood stiffly nearby, his phone buzzing nonstop. Gareth growled, The leak is everywhere. We've lost control of the narrative. Tanner, sweating slightly, responded, Media outlets, tech blogs, investor forums, they all have the file. We underestimated them. Gareth sneered. Get me legal. Get me PR. Spin-in. Queridos Sharasaman it. His assistant rushed in. Pale. Sir, there's more. Leah Warren has just released a statement. She's sided with David Jackson in Project Soil. Institutional investors are pulling back. Gareth stared blankly. Leah, my own daughter. Tanner's voice dropped. She's cut you off. Gareth. She's calling for a board vote. Gareth stormed out toward the boardroom. They owe me everything. As they walked, Gareth hissed at Tanner. This company is mine. I built it from nothing. Tanner replied coolly. And now you've burned it down. Inside, the board members sat stiffly. Leah stood at the head of the table, composed. Gareth barked. This is a coup. Leah calmly replied, No, Father. It's accountability. We have evidence of systemic targeting and unethical acquisitions. The shareholders want change. Board member 1 leaned forward. Gareth, your actions have exposed us to massive liability. We can't protect you anymore. Board member 2 nodded. Stock is plummeting. Our clients are demanding answers. Gareth's voice rose, desperate. You'll regret this. I built this company. Leah met his glare steadily. And now you're destroying it. Another board member said sharply. We trusted you. Now we have no choice. The board chair cleared his throat. Effective immediately. We are voting on a motion of no confidence. Gareth paced furiously. You can't do this. Tanner whispered. They already have. The votes were cast. One by one, lights on the display board lit up in favor of his removal. Gareth's shoulders sagged. You're making a mistake. You'll collapse without me. Leah's voice softened, but remained firm. We'll survive, and we'll do it with integrity. Security quietly entered. Gareth looked around at faces now cold and distant. He straightened his suit. You've won today, but this isn't over. As Gareth exited under guard, Tanner turned to Leah. What now? Leah responded confidently. Now we rebuild. On our terms, or one minute. Another board member added, we clean up every deal, every document. This ends today. The camera of global media panned as Gareth stepped into the cold New York wind. The symbol of unchecked power finally brought down by the truth. As news of Gareth Blake's removal spread like wildfire, the reactions came swiftly from all corners. In Chicago, Ava Johnson stared at her phone as headlines popped up. Gareth Blake ousted by board in historic vote. Warren and Blake faces federal investigation. Project Soil's role in exposing systemic exploitation. Chloe Richardson, sitting at her tiny apartment desk, refreshed her blog stats. The views soared by the second. Her hands trembled. Chloe, Ava's voice came through the phone, urgent and excited. They did it. David and Leah pulled it off. Chloe whispered, I can't believe it. We actually brought them down. Ava chuckled. Don't get comfortable. They'll try to regroup. We need to be ready. Chloe sighed. You're right. I've already started compiling files on other companies with similar patterns. Meanwhile, David stood in the textile office, surrounded by his stunned team. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Marcus muttered, They actually fired Gareth Blake. I thought that man was untouchable. David's phone rang. Gloria Jackson's warm voice came through. David, I'm proud of you. Elijah would be too. David smiled faintly. We're not done yet. Mom, we still have work to do. In New York, Tanner Wilson walked briskly through Warren and Blake's halls, fielding reporters shouting questions. Was this part of a planned transition? Will W&B survive the coming lawsuits? Tanner's expression was icy. No comment. Behind closed door, remaining executives debated next moves. A senior partner slammed a file down. We've got investigations from the SEC, WOI, and media scrutiny worldwide. Another groaned. We should have listened to Laya months ago. At the same time, Laya Warren sat in a quiet corner office, gazing at the company logo. Her assistant entered nervously. Mrs. Warren, what should we tell the staff? Laya stood, voice steady. Tell them this, we're changing. From today, we rebuild on transparency and ethics. The board convened an emergency session. Board member Laya, this is your moment. What's the first step? Laya replied without hesitation. Full audit of every acquisition. End any exploitative contracts. Restore what can be saved. Back at Tech Oil, Marcus approached David. They're going to retaliate. You know that, right? David nodded firmly. Let them. We've got truth and people who believe. That's more powerful than any fortune. Ava joined them. I've already spoken to a dozen minority founders targeted by W&B. They're ready to join forces. The scene faded with global media looping footage of Gareth Blake's walk of shame, juxtaposed with David Jackson at the head of Tech Oil, symbolizing a new era dawning. David Jackson stood in the private conference room at Tech Oil's Chicago office, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. Laya, he said, voice calm but firm, the DOJ has formally opened their investigation. The CC and FTC are following. W&B is officially under federal scrutiny. Laya Warren replied, her voice measured. Their legal team's already called me twice. They're panicking. Gareth's personal assets are frozen. David took a deep breath. It's what they deserve. Ava Johnson entered, holding a file. We have another company. W&B was gutting a minority-led startup last quarter. We stopped it. David nodded. Keep going. Every founder they harm deserves restitution. At Warren and Blake headquarters, Tanner Wilson stood stiffly as federal agents approached. Mr. Wilson, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud. Tanner sneered. This is outrageous. My attorney will destroy you. The agent responded coldly. You'll have your day in court. In Chicago, Ava spread documents across the conference table. We've identified 26 affected founders so far. Class action paperwork is ready. David leaned over the table, eyes sharp. File it. We won't let anyone else suffer in silence. Gloria Jackson entered with a coffee tray. You're shaking the foundations of this industry, son. David gave a thin smile. It was long overdue. Meanwhile, Tanner's high-powered attorney argued with prosecutors. This is harassment, he barked. My client is an innocent businessman. The lead prosecutor stared him down. We have documented evidence, sworn statements, and insider testimony. Save it for the jury. Back at Tech Oil, Marcus whispered to David, they're going to come after us with everything they've got. David replied calmly. Then they'll find we're stronger than they thought. Chloe Richardson updated her blog furiously. For decades, they operated in shadows. Now, they face the light. Later that night, David sat in his office, staring at the city skyline. Gloria entered quietly. You've done it, she said. David shook his head. Not yet. Justice is a long road. Gloria smiled softly. Then we walk it together. As dawn broke over Chicago, the weight of responsibility pressed heavy on David's shoulders. But so did an unshakable resolve. It was only the beginning. The following morning, David Jackson entered Tech Oil's main conference room to find Ava, Marcus, and Gloria already waiting. Ava spoke first. I just got off the phone with our legal team. The federal judge has dismissed W&B's emergency injunction against us. Their attempt to freeze our assets failed. Marcus let out a breath. We're clear. For now, Ava nodded. But the class action filing is going forward. They can't touch us. Gloria smiled warmly. You've proven we don't have to bow to their intimidation. David sat down, weary but determined. Let's keep pushing. This is our window to show others they can stand up too. At Warren and Blake headquarters, the atmosphere was grim. Laya Warren sat across from the board of directors. We've reviewed the internal documents, the chairman stated gravely. You were right. Laya, the acquisition practices were predatory. Laya nodded solemnly. It's time we publicly acknowledge it. Issue an apology. Cooperate fully with investigators. Begin reparations where possible. Murmurs filled the room. One board member objected. An apology opens us to even more liability. Laya's voice cut through the noise. The alternative is worse. We lose what little credibility remains. Another board member hesitated. What happens to our shareholders? Laya replied calmly. We survive by becoming better. If we resist, we lose everything. Back in Chicago, David and Ava walked through the Teshoil office as news alerts pinged phones. Warren and Blake admits wrongdoing. Historic corporate apology shakes Wall Street. Ava looked at David. You forced a Wall Street giant to admit fault. That's never happened before. David shook his head. I didn't do this alone. Marcus joined them, waving his phone. We're getting hundreds of messages. Founders, small businesses, communities. They're thanking us. Chloe Richardson's blog exploded with traffic. Her latest post read, A Titan has fallen, and for once, accountability followed. David stood at the large office window, watching Chicago's skyline. We've taken the first step, but so many still need a voice. Gloria entered David's office holding a letter. It's from Elijah's estate. His final words to you. David unfolded the handwritten note. Elijah's strong, steady script read, Legacy isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you leave behind for others to grow. David stared out the window. We're not finished. Not until every voice that was silenced is heard again. Gloria placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Then let's keep going. As the news continued to spread, venture firms and regulators alike began contacting Techoil and Project Soil to learn how real ethical investment should be done. David smiled faintly. The work ahead was daunting, but no longer impossible. The world was watching, and this time, they would lead by example. As the sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, David whispered to himself, this is just the beginning. The next day, Techoil's boardroom filled with representatives from Project Soil, community leaders, and minority entrepreneurs who had once feared standing against giants like Warren and Blake. David stood at the head of the table. We've made them answer for their actions, but our mission isn't revenge. It's to restore what they tried to steal. Ava nodded. We've secured a commitment from over 50 companies to join our ethical funding network. Marcus scrolled through his tablet. Founders are coming forward. They want guidance, mentoring, capital with no strings attached. Gloria smiled at David. You turned pain into purpose. It's time to lead by example. Meanwhile, at Warren and Blake's New York headquarters, Laya Warren stood alone in the once imposing boardroom. The massive W&B logo behind her now felt like a relic of outdated power. An assistant entered nervously. Mr. Warren, the press is here. They want a statement. Laya adjusted her blazer, resolved. Bring them in. Before cameras, Laya addressed the world. On behalf of Warren and Blake, I acknowledge the harm our company has caused. We will engage directly with those we wronged and create a restitution fund. From today, our business model changes to center on equity and respect. Reporters fired questions. Is this just damage control? Why now? Laya met their gaze without flinching. Because it's the right thing to do. We can't undo the past, but we can shape the future. Back at Techoil, Chloe Richardson interviewed David for her fast-growing media platform. Some say you've humiliated Warren and Blake. Was that the goal, she asked. David smiled gently. No. Our goal was to stop injustice and build something better. Success isn't about tearing down, it's about lifting others up. Chloe nodded, impressed. What's next? David leaned back thoughtfully. We expand Project Soil globally. We prove this model works anywhere. Later that evening, David walked the quiet halls of Techoil, pausing at the framed photograph of Elijah Rowe. The elder statesman's calm expression seemed to silently approve. Gloria joined him. He'd be proud, David whispered. He showed me the way. Now it's our turn to light the path for others. As they stepped outside under the cool night sky, Gloria chuckled. Ready? David nodded, watching the city lights. Let's get to work. The struggle had given way to hope. The real journey of rebuilding and empowering others had only just begun. Chicago's skyline gleamed under the morning sun as David Jackson stood at the grand opening of the first Project Soil Innovation Hub. The converted warehouse had been transformed into a vibrant space for minority entrepreneurs, featuring co-working labs, mentoring stations, and networking areas. Standing beside him, Gloria Jackson whispered, "You made this happen." David shook his head. "We made this happen." Inside, founders from underrepresented backgrounds eagerly filled the space. Ava Johnson greeted a group of young fintech innovators. "You have access to resources, mentors, and investors who believe in your vision," Ava assured them. "We're rewriting the rules." Chloe Richardson live-streamed the event, narrating for thousands of viewers. What began as a defensive stand has evolved into a global movement. Project Soil now boasts over $900 million in committed capital and active programs in 5 countries. Later that day, David led a roundtable discussion with Ava, Marcus, and Laya Warren, who had flown in discreetly from New York. "We're getting inquiries from policymakers, foundations, even international banks," Marcus reported. Ava nodded. "Brazil, Kenya, India, they want to replicate this model." Laya leaned forward. "You've built something Wall Street never expected, a self-sustaining system designed to uplift, not extract," David replied firmly. This was Elijah's vision. "Now it's our duty to protect and scale it." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. Gloria entered with an urgent update. Warren and Blake's board just voted to adopt a permanent ethical acquisition charter. They want to meet and discuss aligning with Project Soil's principles. The room fell silent. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Is that genuine reform or just survival strategy?" David sighed. "Maybe both. Either way, we hold the standard." The next morning, Laya addressed her own company's all-hands meeting via livestream. "We cannot erase the past, but we can become an example of what accountability and ethical business look like." Employees listened intently as Laya outlined the new charter, independent ethics review panels, transparent deal structures, and community advisory boards. Later that week, Chloe's platform published a special feature, "The Rise of Project Soil: How a Grassroots Movement Reshaped Global Finance." It became the site's most read article ever. Back at TechSoil, David walked through the hub, watching as young entrepreneurs pitched ideas and forged partnerships. Gloria joined him. "This is what real legacy looks like." David smiled. "We're just getting started." As the city lights blinked on and new applications for Project Soil poured in from every continent, the first ripple of global systemic change had begun. And for once, it was built to last. A month after the grand opening in Chicago, Project Soil's momentum showed no signs of slowing. David Jackson stood at the entrance of the Nairobi Innovation Center, the second of many planned global hubs. The energy inside was electric. Gloria Jackson walked beside him, surveying the vibrant crowd. "It's surreal. Kenya, India, Brazil. It's happening." David nodded. Elijah would have loved this. Inside, Ava Johnson addressed a packed audience of African tech founders and social entrepreneurs. "You are the leaders of tomorrow. This is your space. Your ideas will get the resources and freedom they deserve." Applause thundered. Back in the Shuyu, Marcus delivered updates. 5 additional centers are slated to open next quarter. "We've doubled our mentorship network. Applications have tripled." Chloe Richardson's media outlet published back-to-back coverage profiles of entrepreneurs, photos of ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and interviews with founders. "Project Soil isn't just a fund anymore," Chloe wrote. "It's a blueprint." Meanwhile, in New York, Laya Warren met with Warren and Blake's senior leadership. Her tone was firm. "We will follow the charter. Ethical acquisitions only. Full transparency. Community review." A skeptical board member asked, "Will that be enough?" Laya replied calmly, "If we want to survive and thrive, yes." In Sao Paulo, Ava partnered with a Brazilian microfinance cooperative to expand funding opportunities. "Local partnerships build trust," she explained to David on a video call. "We adapt to every community." David smiled. Exactly what Elijah envisioned. Back in Nairobi, David spoke to the press. "The response has been overwhelming. We've had over 2,500 applicants in less than 4 weeks. Every one of them deserves a chance." At TechOil, Gloria and Marcus reviewed global dashboards tracking projects and investments. "We've committed over $1.2 billion so far," Marcus noted. Gloria smiled. and we're just getting started. Later that evening, David received a message from Ava, a photo of a young woman holding a certificate from the first Project Soil Startup Academy in Nairobi. The caption read, "Today, I launched my first company." Thank you. David stared at the screen, humbled. The movement was no longer theoretical. It was real lives, real dreams, and real change. As the sun set across multiple time zones, Project Soil's foundation grew stronger. The work had just begun, but the world was finally starting to believe in what was possible. By the third quarter, Project Soil had become a phenomenon. David Jackson found himself flying between continents, meeting with founders, governments, and philanthropists who had been inspired by the unprecedented success of the initiative. At a conference in Mumbai, India, David stood on stage alongside Ava Johnson and local leaders. This is no longer just a program. David addressed the crowd of young entrepreneurs. It's a movement, a global commitment to equity and capital and opportunity. Cheers erupted. Ava leaned over and whispered, "We've just signed 5 more strategic partnerships today. We're in 10 countries now." Back in Chicago, Gloria Jackson coordinated expansion efforts. She and Marcus reviewed proposals from Ghana, Vietnam, and Colombia. "This pace is unheard of," Marcus said, scanning the projections. "Over $1, 6 billion committed and counting." Gloria smiled warmly. Elijah would call it overdue. In New York, Lya Warren faced the Warren and Blake board once again. With firm resolve, she presented a quarterly report showing the company's first profitability under the new ethical charter. "Your decision to adopt reform was not only morally right," Lya concluded, "but also financially sound." The room, once resistant, broke into cautious applause. Meanwhile, Chloe Richardson's media platform exploded in readership. Her series, Voices of Project Soil, showcased founders from every corner of the globe. A video interview of a Kenyan woman launching a mobile health service for rural villages went viral. "This," Chloe narrated, "is what legacy looks like." Later that week in Johannesburg, David walked through the bustling Project Soil hub, stopping to speak with a young inventor. "My water purification device just got funded," the young man explained excitedly. "We're going to bring clean drinking water to thousands." David clasped his hand firmly. "That's why we're here." As night fell, David found himself on a rooftop terrace, gazing at the Johannesburg skyline. Ava joined him with a tablet displaying the live map of Project Soil's reach. "It's spreading faster than we ever imagined," she said softly. David nodded, a hint of emotion in his voice. "And we're just beginning." The movement had gained unstoppable momentum. From tech startups in Brazil to clean energy projects in Kenya and microfinance cooperatives in Vietnam, the world was witnessing the tangible impact of a vision that had once seemed impossible. For David and the team, the journey was far from over. But the blueprint for lasting, global change was finally real, and the future had never looked brighter. The lights dimmed as David Jackson stepped onto the main stage of the Global Entrepreneurs Summit in Chicago. The audience of thousands grew silent. The massive screen behind him projected images of founders from around the world: the Brazilian fintech pioneer, the Kenyan health innovator, the Vietnamese micro-lender. David took a deep breath. 1 year ago, none of this existed. We stood at a crossroads. We could accept the system as it was rigged, exclusionary, predatory, or we could dare to build something new. The audience hung on every word. We chose the hard road, the uncertain road, the road where people said it couldn't be done. Ava Johnson watched from backstage, her eyes moist. Gloria stood beside her, her hand clutching a folded note Elijah had written before he passed. David continued, "Elijah Rowe taught us that success isn't about how much you accumulate, it's about what you enable others to create." Today, because of Project Soil, 85 startups across 17 countries have launched, over 7,000 jobs created, 12 million lives impacted, and we are only at the beginning. The screen shifted to a video testimonial montage. Founders thanked Project Soil for believing in them when no one else would. Communities showed off new schools, health centers, and clean water facilities built by entrepreneurs. Chloe Richardson's voiceover closed the reel. "This isn't just capital. This is dignity. This is power returned to the people who've always deserved it." The crowd erupted in applause. Many wiped away tears. Backstage, Marcus whispered to Ava, "We actually did it." Ava nodded. "We started it. There's so much more to do." David's voice softened as he concluded, "Every generation has a moment where they must decide, do we stand by or do we stand up?" Elijah stood up. We stood up. Now it's your turn. The crowd rose for a standing ovation. As David walked off stage, Leah Warren waited for him. You've made history, she said quietly. We've made a start, David replied. The work continues. Gloria approached and handed him the note from Elijah. David unfolded it. It read simply, don't let them laugh you out of your future. David smiled, deeply moved. We won't. The event closed with the lights of Chicago's skyline shining through the glass dome of the venue. Hope, unity, and determination filled the air. The revolution of opportunity was no longer just a vision. It was reality, and the emotional wave of change had only just begun. The following morning, the news of David Jackson's speech had spread worldwide. Project Soil trended across platforms. Global news outlets replayed the standing ovation. But for David, Ava, Gloria, and the entire team, this moment was more than headlines. They gathered in Techoil's strategy room. On the wall were pinned photos, the bookstore where Elijah learned finance, the first Project Soil application from Kenya, the contract that forced Warren and Blake to reform. Ava addressed the team. We have proof now. When you fund underestimated people with no strings, they don't just survive, they thrive. Chloe added, and the world is watching. We have a moral responsibility to protect this model. David nodded solemnly. That's the lesson. We didn't build this for glory. We built it because no one should have to beg to have their potential recognized. The team reflected on the barriers they had faced: corporate greed, systemic racism, exclusionary policies. They knew the fight wasn't over. Predators don't disappear overnight, Gloria cautioned. They evolve. David replied, then so do we. Later that week, David was invited to deliver a statement to the United Nations Economic Forum in Geneva. Standing at the podium before the world's most powerful leaders, David spoke clearly. Equity is not charity. It is justice. It is acknowledging that genius, creativity, and resilience exist in every zip code, every village, every nation. What they lack is access, not ability. He paused, locking eyes with the delegates. We cannot dismantle every broken institution overnight, but we can build parallel ones. We can stop asking permission to exist and instead create systems that respect and nurture the human potential waiting to be unleashed. Reporters furiously typed. Cameras flashed. David's voice softened. The next Elijah Rowe is already out there, polishing shoes, coding at night, or selling produce at a street market. Our job is to make sure they never have to wait for someone to deem them worthy. Backstage, Ava hugged David tightly. You've changed the conversation. Gloria smiled through moist eyes. You changed the game. The following day, Chloe's platform published David's full speech under the headline, Equity is Justice, Not Charity. It became the most shared article in the site's history. As David stared out the window of his plane flying home, the clouds parting to reveal distant cities below, he thought of Elijah's final words, don't let them laugh you out of your future. With a deep breath, he whispered, they won't. The moral foundation was set. Project Soil wasn't just a movement anymore. It was a new standard, and the world had just been put on notice. The final scene opens back where it all began: Chicago. The Project Soil Innovation Hub bustled with life. Young founders pitched to investors. Community leaders toured new co-working spaces. Laughter and ideas filled the air. David Jackson stood at the glass wall overlooking the city skyline. Ava Johnson approached quietly. We've come full circle. David smiled faintly. Not full circle. Forward, Gloria Jackson joined them with news. Project Soil just approved its 100th startup. Cheers erupted around the hub. Chloe Richardson captured the moment on camera for her platform's next headline. The revolution of opportunity reaches 100 milestones. Later that night, the team gathered on the rooftop for a private celebration. The Chicago skyline glittered under the stars. David raised a glass. To Elijah, to every founder who believed, and to the ones still waiting for their chance. Gloria added softly, we've proven a new model works. No predatory terms. No hidden agendas. Just respect, trust, and capital. Leah Warren, now permanently CEO of the reformed Warren and Blake Ventures, nodded. And it's spreading. 3 more major funds just adopted our ethical framework. Ava turned to the group. But we can't be the last. The work must go on. David addressed the camera for a closing message. To those watching, this story isn't over. The next chapter belongs to you. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or shut out, know this: we see you. We believe in you. He stepped closer, voice resolute. The system will only change if we keep building outside of it. Join us. Start something. Mentor someone. Fund a dream. Anyone soon. Or simply refuse to accept that exclusion is normal. Chloe's camera zoomed in as David delivered the final line. And when they tell you it can't be done, smile and do it anyway. The rooftop filled with applause. As the screen faded to black, the words appeared. Project Soil, a movement for equity, a legacy for all. Voiceover, if this journey inspired you, like, share, comment, and subscribe to Unveiled Wealth. Tell us your story. Be part of the next wave of change. Because the revolution of opportunity is just beginning. The music swelled. The credits rolled over images of global founders, communities transformed, and Elijah Rowe's journal resting open on a desk, the last handwritten line visible. Don't let them laugh you out of your future.